Chapter 6, Part A of Greener Than You Think. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Greener Than You Think by Ward Moore. Chapter 6, Mr. Wiener Sees It Through, Part A. Whether it was from the exposure I endured on that dreadful trip, or from disease germs, which must have been plentiful among the continental savages and the man who rowed me back to England, I don't know. But that night I was seized with a violent chill, an aching head, and a dry, enervating fever. I sent for the doctor and went to bed, and it was a week before I was myself enough to be cognizant of what was going on around me. During my illness I was delirious, and I'm sure I afforded my nurses plentiful occasion to snicker at the ravings of someone of no inconsiderable importance as he lay helpless and sick. "Paper and pencil you kept calling for, Mr. Wiener, and you that helpless you couldn't hold up your own hand. You said you had to write a book, the history of the grass, to purge yourself, you said. Lord, Mr. Wiener, doctors don't prescribe purges no more. That went out before the first war." I never had a great deal of patience with theories of psychology. They seemed to smack too much of the confessional and the catechism. But as I understand it, it is claimed that there exists what is called an unconscious, a reservoir of all sorts of thoughts lurking behind the conscious mind. The desires of this unconscious are powerful and tend to be expressed any time the conscious mind is off guard. Whether this metaphysical construction be valid or not, it seemed to me that some such thing had taken place while I was sick, and my unconscious, or whatever it was, had outlined a very sensible project. There was no reason why I shouldn't write such a history as soon as I could take the time from my affairs. Certainly I had the talent for it, and I believed it would give me some satisfaction. My pleasant speculations and plans for this literary venture were interrupted, as was my convalescence, by the loss of the Sahara depots. When I got the news, my principal concern wasn't for the incalculable damage to Consolidated Pemmican. My initial reaction was amazement at the ability of the devil grass to make its way so rapidly across a sterile and waterless waste. In the years since its first appearance, it had truly adapted itself to any climate, altitude, or condition confronting it. A few months before, the catastrophe would have plunged me into profound depression. Now, with the resilience of recovery, added to Miss Frances's assurance, it became merely another setback, soon to be redeemed. From Senegal, near the middle of the great African bulge, to Tunis at the continent's northern edge, up through Sardinia and Corsica, the latest front of the grass was arrayed. It occupied most of Italy and climbed the Alps to bite the eastern tip from Switzerland. It took Bavaria and the rest of Germany beyond the Weser. Only the Netherlands, Belgium, France, Spain, and Portugal, a geographical purist might have added Luxembourg, Andorra, and Monaco, remained untouched upon the continent. Into this insignificant territory and the British Isles were packed all that was left of the world's 2 billion people, a blinded, starving mob, driven mad by terror. How many there were there, squirming, struggling, dying in a desperate unwillingness to give up existence, no matter how intolerable, no one could calculate, any more than a census could be taken of the numbers buried beneath the grass, now holding untroubled sway over 9/10 of the globe. Watchers were set upon the English coast in a manner reminiscent of 1940. I don't know exactly what value the giving of the alarm would have been. Nevertheless, night and day, eyes were strained through binoculars and telescopes for signs of the unique green on the horizon, or the first seed slipping through to find a home on insular soil. Miss Frances's optimistic news had been communicated to the authorities, but not given out over the BBC. This was an obvious precaution against a wave of concerted invasion by the fear-obsessed horde beyond the Channel. While they might respect our barriers if the hope for survival was dim, a chance pickup of the news that the grass was doomed would be sure to send its destined victims frenziedly seeking a refuge until the consummation occurred. If such a thing happened, our tiny islands would be suffocated by refugees, our stores would not last a week, and we would all go down to destruction together. But, in the mysterious way of rumor, the news spread to hearten the islanders. They had always been determined to fight the grass, if necessary, as the Chinese had fought it till overwhelmed. Indeed, what other course had they? But now their need was only to hold it at bay until the new discovery could be implemented, and there was good chance of its being put to use before the grass had got far beyond the Rhine. Now we were on the last lap. My interest in the progress of the scientific tests was such that I insisted upon being present at every field experiment. For some reason, Miss Frances didn't care for this and tried to dissuade me, both by her disagreeable manner, her eccentricity, craziness would undoubtedly be a more accurate term, increased daily, and by her assurances I couldn't possibly find anything to hold my attention there. But of course I overruled her, and didn't miss a single one of these fascinating, if sometimes disappointing, trials. I vividly recall the first one. She had reiterated there would be nothing worth watching, even at best no spectacular results were expected, but I made myself one of the party just the same. The theater was a particularly dismal part of Dartmoor, and for some reason, probably known only to herself, she had chosen dawn for the time. We arrived, cold and uncomfortable, in 2 saloon cars, the second one holding several long cylinders similar to the oxygen or acetylene tanks commonly used in American industry. There was a great deal of mysterious consultation between Miss Frances and her assistants, punctuated by ritualistic samplings of the vegetation and soil. When these ceremonies were complete, 4 stakes and a wooden mallet were produced, and the corners of a square about 200 by 200 were pegged. The cylinders were unloaded, set in place at equal intervals along one side of the square, turncocks and nozzles with elongated spray jets attached, and the valves opened. A fine mist issued forth, settling gently over the staked-out area. Miss Frances, her toothpick suspended, stood in rapt contemplation. At the end of 30 minutes, the spray was turned off, and the containers rolled back into the car. Except for the artificial dew upon it, the moor looked exactly as it had before. "Well, Wiener, are you going to stand there and gawk for the next 24 hours, or are you coming back with us?" I could tell by their expressions how horrified her assistants were at the rudeness to which I'd become so accustomed I no longer noticed it. "It's not a success, then?" I asked. "How the devil do I know? I have no crystal ball to show me tomorrow. Anyway, even if it works on the miscellaneous growth here, I haven't the remotest idea how the grass will react to it. This is only a remote preliminary, as I told you before, and why you encumbered us with your inquisitiveness is more than I can see." "You're coming back tomorrow, then?" "Naturally. Did you think I just put this on for fun, in order to go away and forget it? Wiener, I always knew those who made money weren't particularly brilliant, but aren't you a little backward even for a billionaire?" There was no doubt she indulged in these boorish discourtesies simply to buoy up her own ego, which must have suffered greatly. She presumed on her sex and my tolerance, taking the same pleasure in baiting me, on whom she was utterly dependent, as a terrier does in annoying a Saint Bernard, knowing the big dog's chivalry will protect the pest. When we returned, the square was clean of all growth, as though scraped with a sharp knife. Only traces of powdery dust, not yet scattered by a breeze, lay here and there. I was jubilant, but Miss Frances affected an air of contempt. "I've proved nothing I didn't know before, merely confirmed the powers of the deterrent, under optimum conditions. It has killed ordinary grass and some miscellaneous weeds, and that's all I can say so far. What it will do to inoculated Synodon dactylon, I have no more idea than you." "But you're going to try it on the grass immediately?" "No, I'm not," she answered shortly. "Why not?" "Wiener, either leave these things in my hands, or else go do them yourself. You annoy me."